Hello and welcome to episode 37 of the Restoring Human podcast, where we believe humans were designed to flourish. Unfortunately, we live in a culture where many of our modern conveniences prevent us from thriving, but through intentional lifestyle decisions, we can return to an optimal state of health. I am Jarek Bakken.
I am Dr. Alex Agualo.
Oh, smooth, man.
Super smooth.
Super smooth. Today, we've got a very fun topic. I think it's going to be fun. The diabetes. Diabetes. And specifically, sorry, I'm taking my jacket off because I very intentionally wore this t-shirt today.
Quads.
You seen this? This is great. We can talk about this in a little bit. Diabetes. A couple weeks ago, I sent you a picture, or I shared a post I saw on Instagram. It was a picture of the sign of a CrossFit gym, and I've got it pulled up here so I can describe it accurately. It's Octane CrossFit, and they have one of those little letter boards, and spelled out on the letterboard under the sign says, "We cure type 2 diabetes." And at first I saw that and I thought, dang, wow, that is a beautifully bold statement.
Pretty bold.
Not that I disagree with it, but I was like, this, I'm sure, is going to have all kinds of backlash. So then I get into reading the comments on this post. You can go look at it on Instagram yourself. And Mr. Greg Glassman, the founder, CEO of CrossFit, he gets in there with his Instagram handle, CFCEO.
Is this a popular gym?
It's, I don't think it's crazy huge. It's in Phoenix. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's that big. It's definitely not. I don't think it's even the biggest gym in the Phoenix area. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, he gets on here, and so yeah. First of all, there's people in here saying, your guys are dumb. This one lady quotes the exact law that's talking about not being able to claim to have cures of this, that, and whatever. People are railing on her. Anyway, he gets in here. First of all, says he knows this gym. There's lots of medical doctors at this gym. Then it's just kind of funny how he splits this up into different comments instead of just writing the whole thing. It's like he's spouting it off and sending it before he completes his thought. Says the 15-year director of chronic disease at the Mayo Clinic told him that CrossFit cures type 2 diabetes. He says, "I am going to define cure as removing the cause of condition. The cause of," he abbreviates T2, "is excessive consumption of refined carbohydrates, worsened by sedentarism. CrossFit eliminates both." Last comment. No false claims. So, bold indeed.
Yeah.
And that's a whole can of worms that we want to talk about. Let's start from square one. What the heck is diabetes?
Well, he's referring to a specific form of diabetes called type 2 diabetes. So when they, I think, found diabetes, there was, they believe they called it juvenile diabetes, where because they were finding it in children, and this was where it was an autoimmune condition that the person's body just didn't have the ability to actually make the hormone insulin. So therefore, when they would eat something, the blood sugar would go up, and insulin was not there to be able to take the blood sugar out to be able to put into the cells, so that therefore that person would die because they couldn't control blood sugar. And it used to be a fatal disease until they discovered exogenous insulin, so insulin that somebody could take as a medication. But as we got away from the normal human lifestyle, people started to develop a different form of diabetes. And then that used to be called adult onset diabetes, meaning because it took time for this disease to develop in somebody's body, people weren't actually getting it until they were adults. And it was just totally a lifestyle disease, like you've already described. At its basic level, it was eating too much of the wrong stuff and not exercising enough. And we can kind of get into later why those two things are important for specifically diabetes. But what was happening with this particular form of diabetes is not that the body's had the inability to make insulin. The body was perfectly fine at making insulin, but because of what was being put inside the body and the body not being able to move, the cells became resistant to the insulin trying to grab the sugar and put it into the cells, which is why they call type 2 diabetes insulin resistant diabetes, where the other one, the juvenile diabetes or type 1, is insulin dependent. So we need insulin because we can't make it. The other one, we can make it, but we're resistant to it because we make too much of it. So those are
it's almost strange that they're called the same thing.
very strange.
Yeah. So, okay, that's one thing I didn't really understand. So
Yeah, I guess the two similar parts of it would be the blood sugar goes high.
Right.
In one, because you're dependent on insulin because you don't have it to make. The other one, because our cells will become resistant. So then there's nowhere to put it. So it's going to stay in the blood.
So okay, so what's the danger of sugar in the blood?
Sorry. Danger of sugar in the blood is I can't remember the exact amount, but it's like even a couple teaspoons or a teaspoon or something like that is, if it goes beyond that, we would die. Just because the sugar is so toxic for the blood. It's just like a poison to the actual bloodstream. So people can go, if there's too much, it goes too high, then they go into a coma. So there's diabetic comas. It could get to the point where they would actually die from that. And if they have it consistently, if it's a slower process, kind of a chronic condition, then it starts to cause all kind of issues like blindness, neuropathy, because it destroys the nerves. And that's when people would have pain in the feet, pain in the hands. It destroys the arteries. It's going to cause oxidative stress to the arteries. So then that's where it's linked to most people that have diabetes end up dying of heart attacks or some sort of cardiovascular event because they damage their cardiovascular system so much with all the high blood sugar. So it's definitely a dangerous thing to have high blood sugar. And that's why it's kind of become its own disease. But it's as far as it, what the type 1, type 2, the type 2's 100% a lifestyle thing.
Yeah. So let's stick with type 1 for just another second. The conventional treatment for type 1 is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is exogenous insulin.
Yeah.
So your body's not producing insulin. You can't take the sugar from your blood, put it into cells. You need that, transmission from the insulin for that to take place. Is that is having that exogenously, is that like the only thing that can be done about not being able to produce insulin, or what?
As far as we know, there's there's not enough. I don't think we've had enough time to research autoimmune disease, and we don't put the money into researching autoimmune disease enough. At least So I think we've talked a little bit about autoimmune disease on here before, but really there's three things that go into autoimmune disease. There's a genetic predisposition to that.
Mm-hmm.
There is some sort of environmental factor that basically triggers the disease process happening. And then there has to be some sort of a gut issue. There has to be that leaky gut that we talked about in the last series. Most of the research goes to, so when you're like donating money at Hy-Vee or whatever, they say, would you like to donate $1 to juvenile diabetes research? All that's going to is try to figure out how we can stop the genetic part of it.
Okay.
Like it has really nothing to do. They're not saying what can we do about the environment, what can we do about healing people's guts. So we don't have enough information to say, hey, if we were to address those factors, could a person's body heal enough to where they could start to produce the cells that are in the pancreas that are not producing insulin? Could those heal? Could those be repaired enough to where the body can now start to produce insulin?
Yeah.
So as far as we know, yes, the only actual treatment of it is giving insulin. But there's I've known plenty of people with type 1 diabetes that have paid attention to their lifestyle and went somewhat extreme on their lifestyle to address the environmental factors as well as the autoimmune part, or as well as the leaky gut part. And their bodies have gotten to the point where they've healed enough where they barely need any insulin. They're able to control their blood sugars through just what they're putting in their body and the other lifestyle factors. Which is huge compared to most people with type 1 diabetes, because now, because of the terrible lifestyles of most Americans, if they have type 1 diabetes and they're just given insulin, basically what they're told is you have to take this insulin for the rest of your life. Your lifestyle really doesn't matter. If you're going to eat a terrible meal where your blood sugar is going to skyrocket, what does that mean? That means you just take more insulin. And now a lot of people with type 1 diabetes have also type 2 diabetes. So they become insulin resistant and insulin dependent.
Gosh.
And the reverse has happened. Let's say you don't have the autoimmune disease and you have type 2 diabetes, but again, you take the diabetes medications that are recommended, and then you also are on insulin because you are not only insulin resistant, which led to your diabetes, but you're also insulin dependent because
that's vicious.
You have to give that exogenous insulin to even come close to keeping your blood sugar under control.
That is vicious. Okay. So it definitely wouldn't be called a cure, but a symptom management for type 1 diabetes. Your body can't control the sugar that's in your blood. One option is don't spike sugar in the blood.
Right.
So you're talking high fat, low sugar, low to zero, no carb diet.
Yeah.
Is potentially an option there.
Yeah. Yep.
And arguably could put you in a state where your body could potentially do some healing.
Right. I mean, and there's, if the body can't, in its current state, can't make insulin, it's not like we talk a lot about being insulin sensitive. It's not like we don't want to produce any insulin. We want, the body has to produce insulin for, various other factors, part of your immune system, and you just even being able to get to produce energy, we have to get things into the actual cells, into the mitochondria, and insulin does a lot of that. So we need insulin. So you still wouldn't necessarily be able to survive by just eating that type of diet without insulin. But yeah, you'd be a lot better off if you were doing that sort of thing, even with type 1.
Man, yeah. Boggling my mind. Okay. So that makes complete sense. Your body can't produce this hormone that is necessary to put the energy that you're consuming through your diet to put it into use. Makes complete sense. So after I found this thing and said, hey, I want to talk about this, I've been doing a little bit of research on diabetes and insulin and all this stuff. And for a while now, the treatment of type 2 diabetes being exogenous insulin made zero sense to me. And I've kind of connected some dots as to, like, that's pretty valid that it still makes no sense. But now I'm like, oh, okay, it shouldn't make sense. So if the treatment is the same, so the difference is the body's able to produce the insulin, you're just not, like, you're not, there's so much being produced all the time that it's not being, your body's basically saying, like, too much, I can't handle all this, right?
Yep.
So who decided that more insulin was the right answer?
Oh man, so a long time ago we did a podcast on education, and we talked about how when something is found out in research, it takes years upon years upon years for it to actually come out clinically, for it to be used on patients. And I think that's kind of what's happening here. Number one, they were never doing the research. They just kind of assumed, hey, these people have a blood sugar problem. We know insulin brings down the blood sugar. So until we can really figure out how to research the genetics part of it, which is what they always do, and maybe come up with the actual cure, we're going to at least manage this disease with the insulin. And that's been going on for so long, and I think it's just been trained and trained and trained and trained. And then when something's been done for so long, when you actually are now even reading other research or planning other research, we tend to like try to make it fit what we already know about the disease. You know, so if like somebody does some research that says something maybe that would be going against what we believe about it, then we can kind of justify of, you know, this was bad research, or, you know, this person maybe had some sort of a bias, that type of stuff. And then if we're going to go plan a study and we think that this is right, then we try to use that study to prove what we already know. Mm-hmm. So I just think there's just been a lot of really bad research. Plus, there's so many people that have type 2 diabetes. There's so many people that have pre-diabetes and what's called metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance problems. Mm-hmm. I think it's like a third of our country has it right now. So there's really no time for actual doctors to think about anything else, because they have all these patients coming in and saying, okay, well, here's what we know right now, so do this. And, you know, I have to get to the next person that I have to give the same thing to, basically. So there's a lot of research currently that is happening showing what we're talking about, that insulin. You know, somebody like you who just looks at it and says that doesn't make my basic understanding of physiology doesn't really make a lot of sense. There's a lot of research now that is proving that, but that unfortunately it's just going to be a lot of time for that to actually come out and it be a actual treatment.
Right. So, because granted, I didn't know much about the. You call it a disease, chronic disease? Yeah, you call it that. Didn't really know much about it. The fact that it's like you can attribute a death to type 2 diabetes, like the more I've learned about it, like a lot of times it seems like it's not necessarily the high sugar in the blood. It's like different effects from this, like the outrageous amounts of insulin that are then in the body, right?
Yeah.
So it's like they see this like problem. I won't put my little air quotes there. Sugar in the blood's a real problem. However, with type 2 specifically, it's not like that's not the cause of the problem.
Right.
Like, it's not the fact that out of nowhere you've got sugar in the blood.
Right.
There's that's not like, whereas when it's a genetic thing, when it's from birth, that may be the case. That's not the case with this type of the disease.
No, not at all. It is, I mean, the blood sugar is the symptom, and it's like, that symptom, if it goes on long enough, we've already talked about it, it can cause diabetic coma, it can eventually kill somebody. Chronically, it causes neuropathy and cause you to go blind, and just even the blood sugar in there itself could cause cardiovascular issues.
Because the insulin's taking the sugar elsewhere.
Well, no, so just the sugar in the blood is damaging to the body. It's toxic to the body. So
Sure.
that could lead to more disease processes or more symptoms and eventually kill somebody. But it's why the sugar is in the blood that leads to more problems.
Right. So I guess maybe my question is, with type 2, what's the insulin then doing with the sugar in the blood? If it's at least keeping somebody alive, what's this?
What's the exogenous insulin doing?
Yeah. Where's it taking the sugar?
Yeah. What do you think?
Everywhere else.
Yep. So basic explanation, insulin takes sugar from the blood and puts it inside cells. So that can go into a muscle cell, that can go into a liver cell, that can go into a fat cell. So basically the body's like, hey, I have energy right now. If I'm not going to use it right now, I'm going to store it up in case I need it for later. So I'm going to figure out where to put it at. So it'll find a cell to put it in. We all have kind of this genetic limit of how fat we can get. So if we fill up all of our fat cells, so let's just talk about one cell, it has enough fat, has enough either fat that's been put in there or sugar that's been turned into fat that's stored in there, that's when it becomes insulin resistant. That's when it's going to say, I can't have any more. So then it would go on to the next cell, fill that one, next cell, fill that one. So it goes to all these, liver, muscle, so that it can be used, because those are the ones that really use the energy. But then if it does it, then it just starts to go around, your belly, starts to go around your arms, starts to go around your butt. It just figures out where to put all these things. And the very last thing is when it starts to put it around your heart, around your pancreas, and that's called the visceral fat, which will eventually kill you. That's where all the fat around your vital organs is the really chronic disease part of it. So it finds out where to put it, but the more you put, that's why people that are on insulin, they gain weight, And so Dr. Jason Fung, who you posted a video of him
it's so
on
good.
the thing, he said, he even admitted, because he's like one of the biggest ones that's speaking out against insulin being the treatment for type 2 diabetes.
And he's an MD?
He is an MD, yeah. He's a nephrologist, so a kidney doctor. So he gets all these people that have type 2 diabetes, and it's destroyed their kidneys. So he's there to manage their kidney disease, but what he does is gets rid of the type 2 diabetes, and he knows the kidneys are going to heal if they get rid of the type 2 diabetes.
Sure. Yeah.
So he's admitted that it took him a very long time for him to figure out the whole insulin thing. And he said, what's crazy is my patients were telling me this.
Yeah.
My patients would come in and say, Doc, the more insulin you give me, the fatter I get.
Yeah.
This doesn't make any sense to me. And because he was trained that way, he said, well, that's the only treatment we have. That's all we can give to you. So the patients know that something is not, this doesn't seem to be right? The treatment you're giving me seems to be making me worse. So that's what happens. It makes you, it is anabolic. It makes so bodybuilders, even if they want to put on more mass and more muscle, they take insulin. And so we could put on muscle, we could put on fat, or the body's just going to grow tumors. And that's what tumors are, or that's what insulin, one of its effects is tumor producing. So there's insulinogenic tumors that happen. And that's just what it's going to do, make us bigger. It puts tissue on our body, basically, is what insulin does.
That's nuts. So, okay, let's back up slightly. What is, so break down what is the actual lifestyle, because we have established this is type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle disease. What's the lifestyle that leads to insulin resistance?
Anything that is going to cause your cells to take in a ton of energy and not use that energy. So again, basically eating a bunch of carbohydrates, mostly refined carbohydrates, but also eating fat at the same time as those. So like a high-fat, high-carbohydrate diet would be the worst possible thing that you could be eating.
So what is it about that combo?
So those are both forms of energy.
Sure.
So the body wants to store it. And if insulin is on, like we've talked about previously, you can't burn fat for energy. You can't use it for energy.
Mm-hmm.
So the fat you're putting in your body, if you spiked insulin with the carbohydrates, and if your chronic diet is always carbohydrates or anything else, like even protein that brings insulin up, then even the fat you're putting in your body, you're not going to burn, you're not going to use, you're going to store it. So then now that's what I was talking about. It goes into the cells. Your cells have a genetic kind of limit to how big they can get. Once they've got to that point, they pull in all the receptors and they say, I'm not taking it anymore. And now you become insulin resistant. And you eventually will have type 2 diabetes. They say that it's, I think I heard this from a guy named Dr. Ben Bickman, he's a researcher, biochemist, and he studies insulin resistance a ton. He said it's 10 years. What research shows now is that you are insulin resistant for 10 years before you have type 2 diabetes.
Really?
So we could do a ton for people. Pretty much the disease, I think, could be eradicated if we just address the insulin resistance part, if we just address that. Because there's nothing that we can do outside of just stop doing that.
Yeah.
Right? There's nothing you could take. There's no any sort of other procedure, surgery, none of that you could do if you're going to continue to eat a high-fat, high-carbohydrate, high-toxin, I would add into that diet. It's only stopping to doing it. That's going to be the answer.
Yeah, that's crazy. So that okay, so that guy you referenced, what's his name?
Ben Bickman?
No, sorry.
Jason Fung?
Yeah. So the kind of the two things that he was talking about in this that really kind of, blew my mind a little bit. As you mentioned, there's two types of energy, essentially, that we're taking in. Either carbohydrates or fat. Both of them the body can utilize for energy. And so the kind of conventional wisdom of the low-fat diet essentially came from this understanding that let's introduce this little thing called a calorie and do some simple math saying that a gram of this fat is much more dense calorically than a gram of this carbohydrate. Well, the answer must be we just need to consume less energy through fat than and we can let people eat the carbohydrates because there's far less energy per gram here.
Right.
That must be the answer.
Right.
One of the things that was super interesting that he was talking about is calorie is this just unit that we have made up. You know, it's not something that your body actually knows anything about. Your body does not know, like, it has no scale, no receptor for a calorie.
Right.
You know, I think there's value in understanding, you know, how that kind of works, and to a degree it is helpful, but like, it is not a simple game of math.
Right.
And so what that also led him to say is he's not necessarily on a super high fat, low carb guy. He's an anti-insulin guy.
Right.
Is essentially what he was saying. So it's like your body needs and can use carbohydrates. It's great. The problem is it when every 2 hours, every 20 minutes, whatever. This is that little video I shared. You're eating, telling your body, store fat, store fat,
Yep.
store fat. That's where this problem is arising. And so that's then where the beauty about fat and why ketogenic stuff and all this high fat stuff has become so popular is because fat has no response on insulin.
Right.
Or insulin does not respond to fat.
Yep.
Beautiful. There.
Yeah, so he's probably the
Close the
main
book.
person. I mean, there's a lot of people talking about the whole intermittent fasting thing or time-restricted feeding, but he's the main person, at least that I know of, that has really, I guess, got it out there that fasting is beneficial for the body. Specifically, again, he's using it as a treatment. I mean, he would be on board with it just being part of a healthy lifestyle, but I mean, that's how he helps all these people with type 2 diabetes is fasting. So he talks about, in that video, he mentioned that most people who know what they're talking about are kind of in agreement with what to eat, but it's the when part of it that is we're still having trouble with, which is just something that's over time been changed. We eat so much now. That was the first time I heard of research that when they look at how many times people eat, like the high, like the 90th percentile eat more than 10 times a day.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And nobody eats less than 3. At least when the people that they've surveyed, it was like 3.3 times a day was what the lower the 10% was.
Yeah.
So it's eating, my insulin's up, and it never comes back down. I eat again, it never comes back down. I eat again, it never comes back down. So that's how people get chronically high insulin levels, and then that's how it's how it creates insulin resistance in their body.
Yeah. I also, this was an older interview, but the Deep Nutrition girl, I listened to her talking to Dave Asprey, and very similar conversation, just talking about, specifically they were talking about like kids and how, like, and I've even been dealing with this a little bit. It's like the like snacking culture is what has like led to this. Kids eat breakfast before they go to school, then like an hour or two later there's a mid-morning snack. Everybody gets whatever it is, graham crackers or fat reduced milk, whatever it is, and just like breeding this just habit of this insulin response, this store fat, take something in, like just on the hour, whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it goes right along with just the change in our culture of it's always go, 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 go. Like nobody could ever just chill out. Nobody could ever just do nothing. One of the biggest things that my wife more so than I have, because it still seems kind of weird for me, but she says she's trying to teach our kids that you need to learn how to be bored.
Yeah.
Like, life's not going to be all about fun and always having something to do, which, I mean, I guess it probably could be in the culture that we live in, but that's not how it was supposed to be. And you need to learn how to just not have anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember when I started, but I did another 3-day water fast, and it was unbelievable. I was hungry 0 times
Mm-hmm.
for 3 days, but I wanted to eat 5,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I ate, nonstop, just wanted food in
Mm-hmm.
my body.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just like super convinced now that it's way easier to do a 3-day fast than it is to do just a 20-hour fast.
Yeah.
Because or even to like eat 3 meals a day and take that 4 or 5 hours between them. Because
Yeah.
if you've given yourself food, it just now, I'm sure it's partially biological, that gives you this dopamine fix,
Mm-hmm.
and now you want more of that dopamine fix.
Yeah.
Where if you're going to say, I'm going 3 days, now you're looking for other things to bring you pleasure.
Yeah. So that's also interesting too, because it's not necessarily the like any type of like digestive hormone. It's you enjoyed it, and
Right.
I think that's great. We should enjoy food. It's
Sure.
a wonderful gift. But one of the other things that we're talking about, the deep nutrition girl, like again, forget her name. It's like if
Kate Shanahan. I think?
yeah. If you even if you're not fasting, you do eat breakfast. If you don't screw breakfast up, like you don't necessarily need to eat lunch. You
Right.
know, it's like if you avoid carbohydrates at the beginning of the day, we've talked about that a number of times. Have something, real food, high in good quality fat, like, and then she was talking about like if you're, it's lunchtime and you've got like 0 good options, well, your best option might be not to eat, and like you're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
super
I
interesting.
think something that might be, maybe it's just interesting for me, I don't know, might be helpful though, is to know that insulin resistance is not the body, that something's gone wrong in the body. It's the body doing the right thing at the right time. It's kind of how we were just genetically programmed with this intelligence of our body to do something right. So if we think about like a bear, when the bear is going to go into hibernation,
Mm-hmm.
like leading up to that, they are insulin resistant. Why? Because they need to store as much fat on their body as possible so that they can still survive when they're in this deep sleep. So the body pulls in the receptors for the sugar and it has this energy always out there. So when we eat too much of this stuff, we get full and we have all this, that basically we have enough energy stored and there's just can't go any more in there, then the body is not, it's not broken down, it's not stupid, because I think people could think that, well, why would the body allow the blood sugar to be so high? It's doing it because it's hit a limitation of matter. There's nothing else that could be done. It's
Mm-hmm.
tried everything that it possibly can do.
Mm-hmm.
And again, our educated minds want to say, well, we can overcome that by just giving more stuff from the outside to try to make this work. And
But it's like,
no, you're never gonna be able to overcome the intelligence of the body. So
and okay, and so this kind of leads us to this very sketchy factor in all this. It's like, okay, if the body has this natural response to say, hey, we've got all we need and more, we can't take anything else, like okay, like that's great. The body's responding to that. Let's let the body do its work. It's super smart. The only person who is benefiting from saying, "Oh no, we can fix this. We can like allow you to consume more is the person who is going to be profiting
Right.
from somebody eating more.
Right.
And so,
which is part. I mean, I didn't add that to when you asked me about who the heck came up with insulin being the.
oh yeah, full circle here.
That's the whole thing of, so the research that's going to continue to be done on why insulin's good to give to type 2 diabetes are going to be done by the people who are selling insulin.
And the people selling sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now,
or just processed foods in general.
Well,
like the sugar combination with the fat, and they want, and those are going to be the same people that do the research on why the calorie theory is correct. Because if the calorie theory is correct, it doesn't really matter if you eat that terrible stuff, because it's just the same amount of calories as a piece of steak.
Yeah.
So it's the same. If you're going to eat it, go ahead and just move more, burn it off. Not the case.
So maybe before we get back to the CrossFit thing, what is the role of exercise in all of this? How does that change the equation?
So exercise is a big part of making you more insulin sensitive or less insulin resistant. So the exercise, again, wouldn't be important to burn calories off. It would be important to make you more insulin sensitive. So if I have a lot more muscle on my body than I have fat, then the muscle is like just holds on to the energy stores because it uses it very quickly. Because when we use our muscles, their metabolism of this energy is a lot more than the other parts of our body. Plus, when you do eat something like a high sugar food, muscles have this process that it can bring in that sugar into it without insulin. It's not insulin dependent. So the more muscle we have, the better we're going to do with taking in those carbohydrate foods, which means if, let's say, an insulin-resistant type 2 diabetic takes in 100 grams of sugar, and I take in 100 grams of sugar, if I'm super insulin sensitive, or let's not use me, let's say an Olympic athlete,
sure,
this person is going to their insulin's not going to go up as much because they have enough muscle to use that sugar, or that person most likely has no muscle.
Yeah.
So that's going to spike insulin a ton, which is then you get into this vicious cycle. The more you spike insulin, the more insulin resistant you're going to become. So the exercise allows you to not require as much insulin, and it also makes your cells more insulin sensitive. So you're going to even utilize the insulin that does get produced in a better way.
Yeah. So that's where you get, big dudes like Austin, who we had on here, who, might seem like, oh my gosh, he can sit there and eat so much more than I can. Like, yes, he can, because it's not a calorie thing. He's doing something, exerting himself to where he's then has to fuel back what he's exerting.
Right. I mean, I guess there's some parts of the calorie thing you're still, if you're exercising, you're of course using more of the energy, but that gets negated if insulin is high. Doesn't matter how much you're exercising, you're not going to burn fat off of your body if insulin is high. So it's becoming more insulin sensitive that is the important thing with exercise.
Yeah. So I think it's probably important to just at least touch on the fact that, so when insulin takes sugar, puts it into, like muscles, for example, that's then this, when we're talking about exercise, that's then this super quick, readily available energy for muscles to use. And so then when you use it, depleting that's where you're talking about, okay, now my body's in this state where it's like your muscles are essentially hungry. It's like, give me this energy. You just used all of this. Like, come on, bring it on. I need this to kind of, refuel.
Yeah.
So, back to where we started. We have the cure for type 2 diabetes. CrossFit is at the base. We've referenced this pyramid a couple times. At the base, so picture the old school food pyramid, like different layers as you go up, each of them getting smaller, biggest at the bottom. The base of the CrossFit pyramid, nutrition. What kind of nutrition? Restricted carbohydrates, nuts and seeds, fruit, meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, no sugar. That's the core, the foundation of what CrossFit is. CrossFit is not primarily a, training regimen. It is absolutely, like, that's a huge part of it, but the foundation is restricting carbohydrates, essentially. Then, built on top of that is all these other things, metabolic conditioning, weightlifting, sport, all of this stuff that then is not the what that sign isn't saying is that, hey, we've got this amazing exercise that will, like, allow your body to fix the problems that it has. It's saying that the foundation of what we teach plus all of this other stuff that we do is like the winning formula.
Yep.
And
I mean, there's that's all true.
yeah.
I looked this up. This is Wikipedia. A cure is a substance or procedure that ends a medical condition, such as a medication, surgical operation, a change in lifestyle, or even a philosophical mindset that helps end a person's suffering or the state of being healed. So, yeah, that would fit into that. So I think, I didn't read the comments, but I think part of why people maybe were offended is, pride goes into that, right? If somebody didn't come up with it, they probably were like, man, I wish I would have said that, and they didn't say it, so then now they want to speak against it, and it's probably part of that. But people also in the medical field, they are in that, and that's part of their identity, so their identity might be getting attacked. They might feel like their identity is getting attacked, so of course that's going to result in trying to defend. But hopefully if we could just get rid of all of that and it's not, and we don't see it as part of our identity, we just really want to end this suffering that's happening, then we could be accepting of something like that. Who cares if it's illegal to say that? If somebody actually believing that and then putting that into action and they got help, they don't have type 2 diabetes anymore, I don't think anybody would care that it was illegal to say that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. Yeah, and like, heck, maybe the fact that it is illegal it'll allow you to get more attention towards what you're trying to do in the first place.
Right.
And help people. So I'm not advocating for breaking the law. I don't even really understand if it is against the law, but
it is. There's a whole, even what we do, we're probably supposed to be having some sort of disclaimer saying that this isn't medical advice. We're not telling anybody that this is the cure and everything like that. Which
does that.
Which we don't. No, we're not saying that. But that also, I just think about how crazy that is. Like, we've given the medical community this kind of right that they're the only ones to say that this is the cure for whatever you have going on. And if anybody else says it, then that it's illegal to say that. And I know part of that is because, if medicine says that and then it doesn't happen, then they could be sued, because of malpractice.
Sure.
And, that CrossFit gym can't be sued because of malpractice. So there's part of that whole thing that goes into it. But it's just kind of an example of how we've taken responsibility of our own health and put it into the system, and says, you guys are the smartest people in the world and you know everything about my health, so tell me how to get healthy. And unfortunately, that system has become, enabling people to continue to live a terrible lifestyle because they have the answer of some sort of a drug or some sort of a surgery to do. Yeah, that's not gonna relieve suffering. So whether that, sign is legal or illegal, that sign's gonna relieve suffering if people accept it and do something with it, which is what we're about. We want to relieve suffering, and that's why we're talking about this sign in Arizona or whatever. So yeah, who cares about maybe that's not something I should be saying either. Who cares? But we want people to get better, right? We don't want people to have to suffer from type 2 diabetes, and we I think another thing is we respect people's intelligence. That there's not somebody that's going to see that sign and say, oh, I'm just going to go and walk into this gym and say, hey, where's the cure for diabetes? They're going to have an understanding of, oh, this is something that I actually have to do now. What these people offer, what these people teach, I have to then do, and then potentially my diabetes could be cured if I do it. That doesn't mean I go right in there and I stop taking some sort of medication that my doctor gave, or I stopped going to my doctor. None of that stuff is implied in that. It's, hey, we have an answer. If you do what we do, if we do what we teach, then the suffering that you're going through could be relieved.
Yeah, that's so good. We can just change our verbiage and say, can't say cure. We probably have something that will relieve the suffering you're experiencing associated with type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
Make it super convoluted. Way off topic. Speaking of my t-shirt and doing things that are much more for attention and not necessarily directly to the heart of the issue. First of all, Quadzilla, this t-shirt, if you want this t-shirt, hold on, let me show you this little Easter egg. You might be familiar with this t-shirt right there. You notice that?
Is that Phil's t-shirt?
Yeah. You might be familiar with this t-shirt that this Quadzilla is wearing, this little Quad Cities tee. Our good friend, Phil, Fleet Feet Sports, you can get this there. Back to what I was saying. Did you see that video that I made with him for his house?
I watched part of it. I didn't watch all of it.
Basically made a MTV Cribs parody to sell his house, and it got a lot of attention, even though it wasn't like we were talking about it last night. His wife didn't actually watch the video. It's like, oh, Phil and Jarek made a video walking through the house, giving a little house tour or whatever. Great. So she shared the video without ever even watching it. Then had her phone's lighting up about all this different stuff and not realizing that it's not just a simple informational thing, but it was intended to get somebody's attention. So it worked.
Nice.
They're selling their house. Cool. Anything else going on?
I don't think so.
It's like the end of the show. If you made it this far, we can, just ramble about whatever we want.
I'm thinking about doing that carnivorous diet.
Ooh, yeah. Well, Alex listened to this thing, sent it to me, and so I listened to it. I'm almost done with it. This dude is eating, and he's a carnivore, eating an all-meat diet, and experiencing great markers of health while doing it.
And performance.
And band performance for sure. Yeah, like I don't. Well, okay. So he's probably you're eating a bunch of meat, and he said he's eating like 4 pounds of steak, red meat every single day. I'm wondering what the uh, macronutrient breakdown of that is.
He said he probably would be considered ketogenic.
But crazy high protein.
Yeah. I mean, at the most 50% protein.
Well,
probably 40%, I would say. 60-40 maybe.
Still, though, so what is that, the presence of all of that protein, how's that contributing to just energy usage? Is it just, I mean, the fact that the sugar is just non-existent, is that like he's just super efficient with the fat he's taking in, or what?
No, he's super efficient with his protein being broken down into glycogen so that he can use. So basically, we can make our own. This is why there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate, because we can make our own glucose out of fat or out of sugar or out of protein. So yeah, he's fat adapted. So he's either utilizing fatty acids very well for energy, but he's also, like, when he gets into the glycolytic parts of exercise, his body's really good at hurrying up and making sugar out of protein that his body has.
And is that a faster process than using fat?
Like breaking down the protein into...
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know the science enough to know if it's like the body is, because he's not giving himself any sugar to make glycogen stores, if this is something that's already been done, so he's already broken down the protein and made it into glycogen stores, or if it's something that's immediate. I don't think it would be immediate. I'm pretty sure it's just something that the body's already prepared for. So no, I wouldn't say like in the moment.
So because he has consumed basically protein to the amount that his body's using, like he's then like already converted this protein into glycogen who's already in his musculature.
Yep. Right, and because he has so much muscle, he has a ton of glycogen.
So it's like, that's also super interesting because it's not necessarily like, so then you wouldn't call that ketogenic. He's not. I mean, unless
as far as like the macronutrient breakdown, I think that's what he meant by ketogenic. Like he would still be super low carb. Oh, he's zero carb and high fat.
Trace amounts from. That would be essentially whatever the animal's eating, I'm assuming.
Right. What's interesting, and I haven't heard him say this, but I've heard somebody else talk about it when they were talking about him, is that he doesn't think quality is an issue either. So he eats grain-fed steaks. He doesn't do the grass-fed.
I assumed so. If he's eating 4 pounds a day, like, I don't know who's got the change for that.
Well, I mean, he's an orthopedic surgeon, so.
Okay, but still, what? Like, let's add that up. What, 4 pounds of grass-fed meat?
And probably with what I just got back on Instagram because I wanted to follow him specifically, and he has about 6 times as many posts as anybody else that I have on my list. So I'm assuming that some sort of meat company has sponsored him and given him as much meat as he wants.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so there's something some magic in the protein, I think. So I've got 2 little stories I want to go down here. Like I said, this is like overtime here. This is great. These are like the conversations that actually, another fun fact, these are like the conversations that Alex and I would probably have in the car, but
Yeah.
Alex bought a car now, so
Yeah.
not driving around anymore. We don't have time for these.
That's right.
So over the past couple of weeks, I've been doing a fair amount of tracking and weighing and measuring my food, just to, like I've talked about this before, just kind of recalibrating, seeing what my normal day is looking like, what I need to change to optimize things. And one of the biggest things I noticed with a normal day, I was pretty low on protein. Because, for example, it's like I would, if it's a day I was not eating breakfast, and then if I did have something for lunch, it might be, like some sort of salad and, high fat avocado, olive oil, some you know minimal carbohydrates, lots of fat there, and then it would really be only one meal a day at dinner time when I'm having some sort of like animal product, you know, whatever that may be, and just feeling, oh, geez, like the amount of protein I'm getting from that is, I can't remember some of the numbers from that. It was just like of I so I kind of set like a goal, and I thought I was being like kind of moderate with the goal, and I was under that moderate goal substantially. So for a couple weeks, not this week, last week it must have been, whatever, last week, 2 weeks ago, I had kind of dialed that in more, and I totally noticed feeling far better at the gym. Um, yeah. The other thing I noticed is that what I kind of pictured as low carb was far more close to ketogenic, and what I pictured as like high carb was actually like low carb. So allowing myself some more carbohydrates, and now I'm just kind of trying to figure out like how and if I should center those around training. Yeah, that's the one thing I'm still trying to figure out. Uh, yeah, the things that we'll forever tinker with.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you sent me this guy who's eating all meat, and it's literally uh, the day before I had listened to. So the high intensity health guy had, I don't think there's a video of this one yet, but or maybe does he do the videos first, or does he do the audio first?
I think it does at the same time.
I don't think so.
No?
Because the video stuff I've seen him pushing is not this interview, is why I've said it's not lined up. But anyway, it is this couple who
Oh yeah, that video's out. The hunter?
yeah, Hunter, and basically this family tries to like grow and gather a huge percentage of what they're consuming. So massive garden, and he hunts for the majority. Like I think they were saying all of the meat they eat in their home. Anytime they would eat any other meat is potentially when they go out. But then they're talking about how when they go out, the quality is garbage compared to what they eat at home. So half the time the lady said, a lot of times I don't order meat when we go out to eat. They'll say, "Oh, do you want the chicken, the steak, or the tofu or whatever with it?" And she said, "I'll order the tofu and just throw it away 'cause that's the best use for it."
Yeah.
Different stuff like that. But listening to that, got my gears turning. I'm like, man, I really should take up hunting
Yeah. With throwing stars.
with throwing stars. That would be crazy. But that got me thinking more about just like in this culture and in colder climates, this culture meaning regionally, like wintertime, it makes perfect sense that people would have been eating meat way, 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 way in abundance to anything else that they were eating.
Yeah.
You can't, literally, there's like next to nothing else available, besides ancient fermenting processes to store stuff. Like,
Yeah, that's crazy. And they would have been eating more of it because the animals are also not able to eat as much. So they're pretty much starving animals. So they're not going to be, number one, is tasty, but also because there's not as much fat, and they're not going to be as well nourished. So they have to eat more of the meat.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, I think it would be. So I kind of have this aversion to hunting just because I know how, not because of the act of it or anything, just because I know it's like, gosh, it's a time commitment.
Right.
And so I just have this natural aversion to it, to just like, I'm not going to go waste my time doing that, but because I have that natural aversion to it, it's probably something really good for me to do. And
like, I think I could do the stuff that guy was talking about. Like, they talked about he stalks animals for like weeks. And if I was like on my feet, like having to, like people do in the Amazon or something, like I'm having to learn how to be quiet. I'm like seeing something and I shoot it right there. So it's somewhat active. I think I could do that, but just to sit in a thing and wait for a deer to come for 8 hours.
Yeah.
That's what suck.
Yeah. So literally this is the most I've ever learned about hunting in this hour podcast. So if I say something dumb and you know more about this than me, humor me. But I would think something like bow hunting, so different seasons or different, what you're using. I would think bow hunting is much more active because your range of shot is going to be significantly different than any kind of rifle.
I don't know. I don't think it's still active. I think you still chill.
Really?
Yeah. You just
we need some hunting friends.
Well, so I have this new patient that is a avid hunter, and he was talking about something that they do where they get like a line of dudes, and then there's another line of guys, and they like walk to like scare animals, and then they shoot. And he was talking about the danger of it because there's other people over there. So that could have totally misunderstood what he said, but that's kind of what I got from what he said. But that's still not active. You're like, that's like whatever, 20 to 1.
No, I'm talking about going and finding an animal and
like the. Have you ever watched that show?
Is that what she's talking about here? Below Zero?
No, I don't know what that is.
Rebecca, I'm gonna put that on my queue. I'm gonna watch that.
It's Chasing Monsters, the guy that tries to catch the huge fish. Anyway, he goes all over the world and tries to catch these huge fish. Like his big thing, obviously chasing monsters. He wants to catch monster, whatever species it is. He wants to catch the biggest one there is.
Loch Ness monster.
So he was fishing somewhere in South America, maybe, but he goes and like stays with the tribes, and those are like the fishing guides that take him out to these places. So at one night, they had to go hunting. So him and the chief just went walking around in the woods, and they seen this bird that landed in one of the trees, and it looked like this bow and arrow that he just made, and he smoked this thing, just 40 feet in the air.
That's badass.
And it just drops, and that's what fed his people that night.
That's so great.
It's crazy. Like, I think I could do something like obviously I would not be any good at it. I'd have to figure out how to get good at it. But that form of hunting, I feel like I could get into.
Yeah. All right.
But just the act of like killing something just to kill it, and because you have this high-powered gun and make you feel powerful. Like, I don't think I get into that type of stuff.
And then what's normal is yeah, you sit, wait, shoot, and then just go take it somewhere else, and they bring you all this packaged stuff just like you would get at the
Right.
freaking grocery store.
Right.
So, yeah, they were talking about how, yeah, once the animal's dead, that's tiniest little bit of what all goes into this.
Yeah.
Yeah, talking about hauling it out, and yeah, he said kill like a 300-pound grizzly bear. Like, jeez, or a black bear or something. Again, humor me.
That would be like a
uh,
baby grizzly bear, wouldn't it?
I don't know. Pulls it out, and so then it's that's a whole process. Then actually doing something with everything, and yeah, that's nuts. That's awesome. It sounds super cool.
Yeah. I would have to learn how to use some sort of a weapon.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because then he's talking about right. So having to train all year long, like to be sharp when it's hunting season.
Right.
Cool. If anybody's a hunter, touch base with us. We want to talk to you. Yeah, for selfish reasons. Yeah, whatever. Did you talk to? Is her name Sarah?
Yeah.
Is that on the books yet?
No, I haven't. I haven't talked to her about.
Oh,
Are we doing that next week?
Whenever she can.
Yeah, I'll ask her.
Okay, cool. So coming up soon, little teaser. Alex has a friend she's a midwife,
Mm-hmm.
and we're gonna talk to her about everything involved with that. Kind of get her story, and we had a question from a listener not too long ago about just natural family planning. So hopefully those topics will come up as well. You can look forward to it.
Cool.
Thank you guys.